This is Real Learning with Real People. These conversations are with real people. They're unscripted and they're designed to pull tidbits of information from people who are grinding right now to get the most out of their lives. With minimum amounts of editing and maximum authenticity, we hope to provide lessons that anybody will find effective, relatable, and entertaining. We seek to have guests that provide learning that's based on their life experiences. Some are chosen because of their experience as high performers in sport, business, or education, and other guests have been chosen because they have meaningful lessons to teach, and I want to make sure they have the platform to share them with the world. The language in these videos is sometimes mature, as I'm always encouraging guests to just be themselves. This is all part of making sure that we do our best to give you content that is both authentic and effective, and that you truly feel like you can utilize the real learning and connect with these real people. My guest this week is incredibly humble, especially considering she could literally beat me up and she stole my man. Retired Marine Corps veteran Kelsey De Santis has served her country in a variety of ways, including protecting 2 former U.S. presidents as a canine handler and as a martial arts instructor. On top of her great work in service of her country, she's fought MMA and trained with famous UFC fighters such as Chris Cyborg. Besides this, she does so much great work for veterans and in training women and children as well in order to teach them self-defense and give them an increased capacity to feel safe in the world. Now, as I alluded to in the opening, Kelsey asked one of my idols and man crushes, Justin Timberlake, to the Marine Corps ball once, and he went with her. So she essentially had my dream date. On top of all of this, she's a mom and is championing so many great causes that are important, so I highly encourage you to check her out. In this chat, we talk about her body image and the body images of others, the value of personal safety, of course, JT, plus a few other very interesting topics. Here's my chat with retired Marine Corps veteran Kelsey De Santis. Hi, Kelsey. How are you?
Good, Ken. Thanks for having me. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm really good. I'm excited that our temperatures are getting a little bit cooler, and I'm disappointed in myself for continually going to the weather at the start of every show. Because there are other things to talk about.
Right? It's the icebreaker, though. You know, you got to do the icebreaker.
Yeah.
You got to talk about weather or something.
Well, I say to a lot of guests, like I need to just hit record, and I know this is a method for a lot of people. Be recording as soon as we come on, because you and I just had a good conversation before I hit record, and yeah. I always miss those conversations in the recorded version. I usually have some pretty extensive notes that I write immediately after, and I write some here while we're talking just to make sure I capture the good stuff on paper, but I miss a ton of stuff by not hitting record early.
I know, I feel you. Me and Jason do that sometimes too, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that was great. Okay, record.
Yeah. Well, so we were talking a little bit about the show, and like I told you, I want to know more about what it was like growing up for you. I love establishing people's framework for a life based off of how they grew up, and then you can tell us a little bit about what you're doing now, what you're passionate about now, and kind of what you're up to.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So I grew up in Southern California and just a little bit north of Los Angeles. And my mom was a single mom. It was me and my brother. She worked full time, and it was definitely kind of a hard upbringing. We didn't have very much. A lot of times we didn't have food, and definitely struggled growing up. And I think that kind of encouraged me to start asking some questions to myself, like, why am I here? And what's more? What is it? Like, what's the point of life, you know, and what is there more out there? And when I was about 15, 16 years old, I found Muay Thai, which was my first martial arts. And I just fell in love with it. It became my filter. It became my channel to really express myself and to feel good about myself. And it was extremely challenging, but I loved it. And it really had a lot to do with who I am now. And it's just been extremely amazing for me to have that channel, especially at an early age. And I found that at like about 15 or 16 years old. And when I was 18 years old, I joined the Marine Corps. So I always tell people that being a fighter before the Marine Corps and then joining the Marine Corps allowed me to kind of it's like the two philosophies kind of go hand in hand. Like being a Marine made me a better fighter, and being a fighter made me a better Marine. And I was lucky enough to be a part of HMX-1, which is the President's Helicopter Squadron. So I worked for the end of Bush's career and the beginning of Obama. I served as a canine handler. I really enjoyed that. I like to call it like my secret squirrel days, because there was a lot of working with Secret Service and doing both stateside missions and overseas missions. It was really interesting. Definitely kept me busy. I was always on the road. And then I got recruited to work at the Marine Corps Martial Arts Center of Excellence, which was another huge, tremendous honor. I worked with genuine American heroes. The guys that I worked with, I had a huge respect for. They each had their own martial arts that they started with. And I got to learn from them, and I got to teach students. And I think it really helped broaden my perspective of martial arts, because I was just exposed to a lot of different disciplines and techniques. And then most people know me because I asked Justin Timberlake to the Marine Corps Ball in 2011, and that was super fun. He ended up coming. And then I got out of the Marine Corps shortly after to pursue my professional fight career and to go to school for the first time, because it was the first time that I was really enthusiastic about getting my education. And I ended up getting my undergraduate degree, and I just finished my master's degree. Well, not just, but it's been like 2 years now. So I finished my master's degree, and I'm super excited about that, very proud of that, because it's something I never thought I could do. Like I never imagined growing up that I would be an academic, so to speak. And I still kind of don't really consider myself to be that type, because I'm more of a physical type. But I went after that because it scared me and because it was intimidating. And so now transitioning from that, I did a little bit with my own career in terms of MMA, and then I started to work with the champ, Amanda Nunes. She's the 135 and 145 champion in the UFC, and she's an amazing person. I started working with her for the Chris Cyborg camp, which was like known at that time as the biggest fight in women's MMA history, and then Holly Holm and so on and so forth. And I also work with Kayla Harrison, who's a 2-time Olympic gold champion, judo. And so it's really been rewarding to be able to work with some amazing people. And now where I'm at is I'm kind of like, right before COVID, I was like, okay, I'm ready to get back into fighting. Like this is my like final thing. You know, I have a kind of a short window here because I'm getting a little bit older, and I'm like, you know, I just want to go for it. And then COVID happened, and pretty much all the lower promotions were like canceled. So I've been kind of adjusting, you know, I'm used to rolling with the punches and being flexible. And so I've gotten back into like the tactical industry. I love to shoot. I love to train in a bunch of different ways. And actually next month I'm launching my self-defense online MMA platform for people to be able to train with me and to learn different disciplines. So yeah, I'm really excited about that.
That's awesome. Has anybody told you how boring you are?
I love it. Thank you so much. It's so funny because when I hear that word, and I'm a mom too, and my daughter sometimes she'll be like, I'm bored. And I'm like, don't you say that. I'm like, you don't say that you're bored, because technically in my mind, especially with the internet, I mean, I grew up in a generation, I don't know how old you are, but I grew up in a generation where, you know, dial up, we didn't have the internet, and I was still finding things to do outside. And now with the internet and all there is, like, I truly don't believe in being bored. I'm like, you can find something to do. Like, you have to find what feels good for you and what makes you happy and just run toward it. And then, you know, sometimes things change. Like sometimes you have a goal set and you're like, all right, I want this. And then something else comes around and it might not be exactly what you hope for, but as long as you keep like driving forward and finding out what it is that you want to do. And a lot of times I found myself is like being like, I don't really know what I want to do, you know, or I'm in this in-between space. Like, I don't know what I want to do here. I don't know what I want to do here. But I encourage people to just let that time take its place, or like let that kind of be what it is, and just keep searching because you're going to find what you're looking for. Like, that's really kind of my life story.
Yeah, I love, well, and clearly you embody a lot of what we value in our company and on the show, which is the idea of really trying to learn and be on the path and appreciate that the path is the goal and that kind of thing. And I would be remiss though if I didn't talk about, and please don't take this the wrong way, what is the most interesting to me in that story. I am the biggest Justin Timberlake fan. Like if you talk to anybody who knows me, I've gone to bat for that guy in conversation with multiple grown men because
Get it, Ken.
they're talking to me about how like all the things that people say, and then I get going on like his humor and his diversity of talent and how he's always ahead of the curve and that kind of stuff. And so when I was doing a deep dive on your stuff, I was like, no way.
Oh my God, I love it.
I am not trying to take away from your service at all, but that is like, I was like, oh my gosh, you can probably give me his number. Like,
no, I love it. I love that because I don't feel like it takes away from my service at all. Like I think it's really cool that a lot of people like Justin Timberlake because I do too. And like you said, his humor and his talent, and it's just incredible. He's really humble. He's a really humble person.
I love
and we had a
that.
great time at the Marine Corps ball. And so like I'm totally with you. Like I fangirl out too with him. He's awesome. And it was super fun. And it's something that people can relate to. You know what I mean? Like for a long time, it's been kind of hard to relate to military type people because, you know, it's just kind of a different lifestyle and whatnot. And I think like that interaction was really important and really special because it allowed a lot of people to be like, who like him to be like, oh my gosh, like this is, you know, he's taking someone in the military to like their ball. Like it was just like a huge thing, and it was super fun, and it was a great way to connect. And it was awesome. So don't even feel bad at all. A lot of people are like, tell me about JT, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm like, for sure, you know, so I get it.
Yeah. Well, you have, maybe not very many people have this, I guess. I can't remember what movie or show it comes from, but you have the quote unquote hall pass with your significant other. And mine is Justin Timberlake. So Justin, if you watch this and there's any interest, then it's really the only time that I'm going to be able to see anybody besides the person I'm with now. So
I love it. Heck yeah. Take that hall pass.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, if you hear a dog bark or anything, little tiny wiener dog, our wiener dog's name is Timber, and he's he's named after Justin.
You're
Timber.
You're a diehard.
Yeah. But I don't want to spend too much time on that because there are so many things that I think are huge in your background and what you're doing now, and that I want people to hear a little bit about. And one of the things, and you kind of touched on it, is your passion for teaching and giving the things that you know to others. And can you talk a little bit about what teaching, whether it's in the martial arts or any of the mentoring and teaching you've done on the military side has been to you?
That's a great question. I absolutely love teaching. My specifically women and children, I have just a certain fire for in terms of teaching like self-defense in particular, and weapons handling and weapons education. I just find it really, not kids, but women, older women, you know what I mean? But kids in terms of martial arts, and but also kids in terms of gun safety and education. That's really important. You know what I mean? Because whether you don't have guns at the house or not, if they go somewhere and they see a gun, you know, like I teach my daughters that if you see a gun, the first thing you do is you don't touch it and you go tell an adult. And I think that's really important for kids to know and grow up knowing that, so that accidents don't happen, you know, and mitigate that. But I love sharing and teaching because I've had so many great mentors and teachers that have taught me everything from, especially in terms of martial arts, everything from wrestling, jiu-jitsu, boxing, judo. I mean, the list goes on. And it's like, it's so fascinating for me because it's like this ongoing book, you know, and I've always felt like an eternal learner. Like that's what I kind of reference myself as. Like, I don't feel like I can ever get enough information. I'm always trying to learn something new. Like I'm addicted to learning. And I think it puts you in a really interesting perspective because to be a teacher, you kind of have to have a humble heart, and you have to understand that whoever you're teaching, everyone that you teach is different, so people learn differently. And like me growing up, I could barely read and write. I had a really hard time with education. And that's what I was telling you about, like my master's degree. I never thought that would happen for me or be able to do that. And so yeah, people learn differently. And so I've always kind of catered my teaching and my learning to that. And I think they go hand in hand. And I just find it so rewarding to be able to give people information that they could possibly use one day. And that's how I feel about like self-defense tactics. So
that's really cool. And I love that you highlight the women and children aspect to that, because especially being in Canada, we have very different, I'm generalizing here, but we have very different views about guns. We have very different views on the military. And it's not that we're against or for it in any different way. It's just a very different part of our culture compared to what it is in America. And some of the stuff that I've read and watched following you is just the unique way that you really educate on those things and it really makes me feel a little bit more connected to the American culture around weapons and weapons in the home. And it makes me understand a lot more the why, the how to do it right, and that kind of thing. And I'm interested just to dig a little bit deeper on that same topic. What is it about the training and the teaching of women and children in particular that appeals to you? Why do you think that's important? And you touched on the safety part, and I don't want to diminish that, but what else is important?
Yeah. So like that question kind of hits back to my childhood. So I grew up pretty much, and you look at me and I think most people assume that I'm a white girl, you know what I mean? Like if you look at me, you see the color of my skin, oh, that's a white girl, and I don't see myself like that. Like that's, I mean, for me, that's putting myself entirely in a box. And I grew up as a minority. I grew up in the projects, and on one side of the street was Crips, and on the other side were Bloods, and like there was gang warfare. And it was a really scary environment. And I remember being young and my mom washing blood off of our front door because some guy was stabbed on our front door in our apartment complex, and following the blood trail. Like, it was just like, it was crazy and kind of surreal to be like exposed to that environment as a kid. And there's a lot of kids that live in these communities, you know what I mean? In poorer communities and stuff, both in, in the United States and around the world. And so I think that had a tremendous impact on me as a kid, is that my mom was always telling me, she's like, you gotta like check your six. Like you have to know your surroundings. Like you never know what's going to happen. And one time there were these men that were approaching me and they didn't see my mom. My mom was like cleaning her car and she was kind of like, she was down low and she was just told me like to be still, because I was like, Mom, there's these guys like coming up to the car. And they got pretty close, like within about 10 yards. And my mom had like popped up and she had like what we would call a weapon of opportunity, maybe, a screwdriver or a knife or a hammer or whatever it was. And they immediately like redirected. Like these two guys were like, okay, never mind, and beeline. And so, if my mom hadn't been there, like, I don't know if I would have been able to like run away, or would I have been scared, like too scared in the moment to not move? I was a young kid at this point. Like I couldn't have been more than like 6 or 7 years old. And that like really affected me, because it was like my safety is on the line. Like, and I truly wholeheartedly believe that everyone has a right to protect themselves, and you never know what's going to happen. Like, regardless of what environment you grew up in or what environment you're in, like a lot of, there's a lot of wealthy people, and, you might think that because you live in a wealthy neighborhood or the suburbs or whatever, that this couldn't happen here. But the fact of the matter is that you never know. I truly believe that there's more good people out there than there are evil, but regardless, there are evil people out there. And one of my biggest fears is like kids being abused or hurt or taken. And so that's kind of been a huge motivator along with women. Cause you know, a lot of women are smaller than men. I tend to be I'm a big girl. Like, I won't lie to you. I'm like 5'10", like I'm like, you know, my back's pretty big. Like I'm very feminine, but I'm a bigger woman. So I definitely have a better chance against a larger human and a man, but most of the time they're stronger than I am. But I've relied on my martial arts and my skills to kind of guide me through that and to, you know, feel secure in myself. So it's built this confidence. Like martial arts has allowed me to build this confidence in myself that has been really eye-opening, that I've used in a lot of other aspects of my life. And it's made me feel more safe. It's made me feel more secure, and it's really fun. So that's one of the biggest reasons that I enjoy teaching children and women in particular, because sometimes whether you're a smaller human than someone else or whatnot, you still have options and you still have the right to protect yourself. So I try to share that as much as possible.
Yeah. And I love Coach Tony Blauer's startle flinch response and weaponizing that kind of stuff. I think that when I heard that stuff from him was when I really started to do a dive into how the quote unquote typical person can start to learn to protect themselves for those situations that you're talking about. And just having that ability to respond if needed.
Exactly. And God forbid you ever have to, but if you put in your toolbox, like I like to call my toolbox, because it's things that I've like learned from other people and I kind of put in my toolbox. And if you've learned how to throw a punch, or if you've just like air punched a couple times, like that could help you be like, okay, like I'm not helpless here, you know, like there's options for me. And I want everybody to feel that. Like I don't want anybody, whether it's a child, a woman, a man, to feel hopeless or to feel like they can't protect themselves against another human being, or from preventing themselves from, you know, going home. And so that's always been a huge thing for me since I was a little girl, is that security.
I'm going to ask a question, and I think I know the answer, but I don't want to assume anything. When you mentioned about being feminine in spite of being like a bigger, stronger looking female. And so I want to ask this question on behalf of other bigger, stronger looking females so that they can hear your answer. And that is, did you at some point really start to try to be feminine, almost to counteract the fact that you're big and you're strong and you're involved in sports and other activities that are going to be perceived as less feminine? I'm doing air quotes for the people that are listening to the podcast, but yeah, was that intentional? Like I want to make sure that I embody my femininity.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great question, because I always, like, I talk to a lot of my friends about femininity and masculinity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I talk about like social projections. Like a lot of times we put on our children that they have to be, because they're a man, they have to do this, or because they're a woman, they have to do this. And it's just so sad, because we all are both feminine in a way, and we are all both masculine in a way, like in some sense, even if you're just talking about the emotional state, like as human beings, like we have these different sides. And whether you're leaning more on one side or the other, it shouldn't be held against you in any way. And it's so sad that sometimes these social projections or these expectations are really hard on people, and they really shouldn't be. And I did find myself like, this might be too much information, but at a young age, you know, like I was telling you, is I have a very strong body type, and I've kind of always felt like bigger and like stronger. And I got breast implants when I was younger. And I did that because I wanted to feel more feminine, and I thought that's what like a woman is supposed to look like. And I got them out recently within the last 2 years, and I just love myself so much more. Like, I know that might sound crazy, but like, I think it's just this like maturity, you know what I mean? And this like understanding of like loving yourself. And I really wish that I had that when I was younger. Like, I really wish that I didn't feel so pressured to like fit a mold, you know, because I think it would have saved me a lot of heartache if I would have just been like, you know what, I love myself, like, and I can be masculine if I want to be masculine, and I can be feminine if I want to be feminine, and that's totally acceptable. So I think a lot of people can relate to that, because just regardless, there's these social expectations, or even if it's from your parents, you know what I mean? It could be from your parents or people in your family. But we're all different and we're all uniquely wonderful. And if you're a female and you want to be more masculine, or if you're a male and you want to be more feminine, like, more power to you. Like, be who you want to be, and really, like, just accept that you're beautiful in and of yourself right now. You know what I mean? Like, right in this moment. Because I think a lot of times we're always thinking like, okay, well, if I lose 10 pounds, or if I get this, then I'll look like, and then I'll, and I don't think self-love is about that. I think it's about saying, you know what, I love myself right now, and I can make improvements if I want to, drop 10, if I want to drop weight, or if I want to do this, yeah, I can make improvements. But to love yourself and to have self-acceptance, I think, is one of the best ways that you can find happiness within, and it's just really happened for me, I think, I would say like my mid-20s is when I really started to not care what other people think, you know what I mean? And just start to be myself. So, and yeah, in some days, and it's so funny because like you see me wearing a flower in my hair like today, right? And so some days this is me, and like other days I'm like wearing the snapback and I'm like, what's up, dude? You know what I mean? Like, so I have these sides, and like I love them, and it's fun for me. And I've totally learned to just accept that and be okay with that.
Yeah, I didn't know all of that to the answer, but I was really I was really thinking that was where you were going to take it, and I think that message is so huge. Like, I've spent the last 6 years coaching university women's basketball and teaching, and that kind of message is one that no matter how well I deliver it, it doesn't land the same as when somebody like you delivers it through your experiences and that kind of thing. And I'm excited that we got that recorded, because I'm going to make sure that few minute clip is going to be something that I share a bunch with a lot of young females that I work with. So
I'm so glad, because it's important. Like, it can change your whole perspective. Like, if you go, like, the longer you go thinking that you're inadequate, or that like you're not as good, like, you're taking away from your own happiness. Like, it's just incredible, the feeling of freedom it feels when you're like, I'm okay with who I am, and I love who I am, and I can be better. I know, here's some things I'm going to do to make self-improvements. But also, like, I'm glad that we're talking about this, because especially in our community, like, I work with a lot of men, and a lot of very like strong, like combat experienced, war fighting men. And they've been through a lot of them have been through some really traumatic experiences, and seen some things that you don't wish upon anybody to see, or to go through. And like, I feel like a lot of times they feel like first of all, how do you deal with that? Like, how do you let that out, and how do you release that? Well, like, emotions and crying is something natural in our like human psyche. And it's just so like, it's so unheard of, or like you don't talk about, or like it's not expected for men to cry. Like, and I just think that's like such a crock of shit, because you feel so much lighter when you cry, you know what I mean? Like, or it's a release, you're feeling what it is to be a human, and it's okay. Like, that's okay. And so, I just want to share that too, because that's another thing that like for men, it's like, people think that like that's feminine, and that's so wrong in my opinion, because you can be very strong and you can still cry, and we need to, like, it's like a natural release for us as human beings,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I'm 100% guilty of that. That's for sure. It's, and what a lot of men, don't I think really realizes how much work you have to put in to be able to get over that not crying feeling.
Yeah.
Cause and I'm in the midst of it. I exist in that trying to be able to be more openly emotional now, because I'll get the feeling and I'm not trying to stop it, but I subconsciously am beginning to shut it down. And it's something that you have to actively work at. It's not making yourself cry, but it's the flip side of the same coin for sure. Yeah. And it is important. It is important.
It is like showing that vulnerability and being like, this is okay. It's such a freeing feeling because it's just been so like a lot of times we just have been socially pushed to just not accept or to be like, oh, they're crying. That's, like look the other way. Or it's just like, it's so strange to me. And I think that I would hope that in the future that we raise our kids to be different, you know what I mean? To accept that like these are human emotions and it's okay to cry and it's okay to feel because that's literally the human experience. You know what I mean? Like you're feeling like it's different, like crying or sobbing or being sad. Like that's different than whining or complaining. You know what I mean? They're totally different elements there. And, I just really want to share that because it's really near and dear to my heart. Like even me, like there's been times where I'm like, as a mom, actually, it's really helped me be way more connected into my emotional side because like nowadays I'll just be like, all right, I'm crying. It's okay. You know what I mean? Like it's just allowed me to kind of break open these feelings and feel vulnerable and just be like, that's okay.
Yeah.
No one's going to judge you that really cares about you. They're going to support you.
Yeah. And that's, it kind of brings up a totally out of left field thought for me, which is like when you give somebody, or not you, but when somebody gets the nickname Cyborg, I feel like I've thought this over and over again. So I feel like I can ask you, does that feel like it's dehumanizing her, or does she likes it? Like it really builds her up? Because when I see the name, it's like some days, and not just because it has nothing to do with who she is. It has to do with what she does. And I'll draw that very clear line. Because I imagine that when you're in the spotlight and you have a nickname like Cyborg, it gets pretty hard to feel like a human.
Yeah, that's a really interesting statement, actually. So, Cyborg is Brazilian.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, we're talking about Chris Cyborg, right?
Yes.
Okay, just to be exact. Yeah. And absolutely. It's so funny that you say this because and you're defining the term cyborg, right? Mm-hmm. But I think for a Brazilian fighter, things are translated culturally differently. Like you mentioned, things are, different culturally than in Canada than they are in the United States, and same thing for Brazil and other places. So I don't know if the terminology so much affects her, but I would say on a holistic level, this is across not just mixed martial arts, fighting industry, military industry, athletic industry. We take on these identities. You know what I mean? This becomes a part of our identity. And I felt this a whole lot when I became pregnant because I was like, I've never even, like, I just didn't connect to that side. Like, I was like, wait a second. I don't know anything about being a mom. I've like held my brother's kid and been like, take the baby back. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what to do with them. And so I was really concerned about that because I was like, it wasn't part of my identity. And then when I got pregnant, I was like, well, I couldn't really fight during that time. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I felt like I lost, like, I was like, I know myself as a fighter and I know myself as a Marine. And so I'm out of the Marine Corps, no longer a Marine, like active duty. And then I'm not fighting. So it's like, wait a second. Do you know what I mean? And that identity, like it's identity crisis. And many of us, I would say a majority of people, because life is like a roller coaster, you have your ups and your downs. And I would say a majority of people go through identity crisis all throughout different parts of their life, whether they're young individuals or you're getting older or whatnot. And to be able to adapt and be like, this doesn't solely define me. Do you know what I mean? Like, I am not just Chris Cyborg. I am not just a professional athlete. I am not just, like, that is not just me. Like, who am I? And I think that goes into identity. And that's a question. I mean, how do you answer that question? You know what I mean?
No, it was a little bit unfair for you too, having to speak for her to ask you that.
Right. But you made a great point because like this, to me, it represents identity. Like, and a lot of people can relate to that because we take on, like, we think a lot of times we think what we do is who we are.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, it has to do with our personality and characteristics of us, but like, it's not, that doesn't solely define us. You know what I mean? And you can go from one identity to the next. Like like I said, I was so scared of being a mom. I was like, I don't even know what to do. Like, this is not in my toolbox. So, and then all of a sudden people were like, oh, you'll figure it out. It's natural, blah, blah, blah. And then sure enough, that happened. And then I took on this different identity and I love it. And I just didn't know anything about it, you know? So it's like identities can come and go. And who you are is constantly kind of this process of growth and development. And I think that is a huge paradigm shift and perception reality that allows you to kind of get through things, because we tie ourselves to this. We're like, I'm this person. But like, what happens if you get injured and you can't do it anymore? Who are you now? You know? So it's important to kind of already have these thoughts in play and be like, I can be something else. Like, I can transition here. Like, I can roll with the punches. I can be flexible, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And we often say when we're working with people that if you want to be a high performer in anything, the first thing you have to do is separate who you are from what you do. And
Beautiful.
nobody who's a top performer and sustains top performance, you might touch it, maybe just kind of graze it a little bit. But if you sustain it, it's because you fully understand that what your top performance is at is not who you are. And that's how you stay there. And athletes, it's easy, but I based on research, I see the exact same thing in the military life, where people can be excellent when they're in service for a little bit of time, but their ability to sustain it physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually is not there if they are a Marine. Who are you? I'm a Marine.
Right.
There's more to you than that. No, there's not.
Exactly.
That's when you know, that's the red flag right there. There's nothing else to me but being a Marine. Okay.
Right.
Now
Because
we got
when
to
that
solve.
stimulus is gone, like, wait a second, you
Yeah.
know, or when that dream or that goal is gone, and this happens to a lot of people. And I mean, it happened to me multiple times. And it's just like, wait a second. Think of that as an opportunity to find yourself. You know what I'm saying? And like you said, I think that's a great thing to let people know, is that what you do does not define you. Your title is not who you are. Is that how you say?
Yeah.
I think
who
that's
you are
wonderful.
is not what you do. What you do is not who you are. All like that dichotomy.
That's beautiful. Yeah, beautifully said. And it's honestly something to take in consideration at every point, because you might be at that high peak, or you might not even be there yet. And you might be like, these are my goals, these are my aspirations. But there's so much more to each of us than just that. And I think that's a freeing feeling too. And it really can open your mind in terms of being like, of loving yourself. Because if you constantly have this perception of like, this is the person you are, anything goes wrong, which plenty of things go wrong,
Yeah.
then, you know, that takes away from that. And that shouldn't be taken, you know, you shouldn't take something away from yourself in terms of loving and caring for yourself. So yeah, totally. I agree.
Well, one of the saddest things in the world to me is people in their late 50s, early 60s who haven't sorted that out yet. Or they're just in the middle of sorting it out, where they're just retired or they're about to retire, and they either don't know that they're not what they do, or they've just now realized, and they're looking back realizing that for the last 30, 40 years, they thought they were that job, or they thought they were that role in the family. I'm just a mom. Like that's what I hear a lot from stay-at-home moms, or not actually moms who work. Like, it's just like, oh, well, at the end of the day, I'm just a mom. Like,
right.
And it's like, you are a lot more than just a mom.
Yeah.
Come on now.
Exactly. I totally agree with you. And you know what? I've met quite a few people that you, like you said, is that they're you know, at the stage of retirement, and they're going through that, and it's better now than never. That's what I always say. I'm like, you know, even if you're like, oh, I feel like I wasted all those years, and then now here I am and I don't even know myself. But if you think about it a little bit differently in terms of like everything you did up to this point has led you here. You know what I mean? So from this point, who can you become? Like, what new book are you going to write? You know what I mean? Like, what is the next page going to be? And that's kind of like, it's spontaneous. You know what I mean? And for a lot of people, because change is scary for a lot of people, like we are creatures of habit. And so like that can be like really conflicting for a lot of people because they're like, oh my God, I don't know. But not knowing sometimes is the best thing ever because it allows you the freedom to be like an adventurer, an explorer of your own like soul, your own destiny. And I think it happens at different ages, and you know, better now than never. So if you're struggling, like, you know, if you're struggling, you're going to get through it. And sometimes like the struggle can bring a double rainbow or the brightest light. So keep going.
Yeah.
Keep pushing. You'll find it.
Well, I love that CrossFit in their training program actually talks about in terms of the physical training sense, where it's true growth or true improvement comes from time under tension. So extended periods of time under tension. And I like taking that concept, and we made it into a little logo and put it on some shirts and stuff like that, because I like using it for everything. Like it's just growth, period. It's not just fitness. It's everything. You need pain and struggle and time under tension.
Oh my gosh, Ken, have you know David Goggins, right?
Yep.
So I was watching one of his videos not too long ago, and he said life is struggle. Like living is a struggle. Like that's what life is. And it's like, it seems like a simple thing, and it pretty much is. But like, if you take that perception, you know, like if you take that on, like to heart, you realize that like anything that's good in life outside of the struggle is great. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because life is a struggle. Like nobody, whether it's JT, friggin' Channing Tatum, anybody, nobody that is living in a human body gets out of living in a human body. Like until we pass away, like it's a struggle. Like living that's what makeup is. Like nobody gets out of the human experience like that. And everybody, to each their own, you know, everybody has their own unique path and their own unique purpose, and finding that, I think, is the whole purpose of life. I mean, and that's constantly it can be changing and being reevaluated and stuff, but you're not alone. You know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of people think that other people have it better than them, or they haven't been given, you know, so much opportunity and stuff. And what I say to that is like, I came from nothing. Like the expectations for me were zero. Like I literally had nothing given to me. And it was one person that believed in me. One person, and he wasn't even an actual family member of mine, like a blood relation. But it was because of that one belief that I was able to do a lot of the things that I did in my life. And I think that a lot of people can find one person, even if that's not somebody in their family. You know what I mean? If you find one person, even if it's somebody that you don't personally know, like David Goggins or somebody that you look up to, you find that one person that you're like, I know, you know what I mean? Like that one person motivates me, and you just get after it, and you'll be so surprised at the strength and the power of your own being. I really, truly believe that.
Yeah, I've got to take David Goggins in very specific doses, because sometimes I just read or watch his stuff, and I know it's supposed to be motivating, but instead it's like, man, what can he not do? He's an on-earth Superman. Like,
I know.
You touched on transition and change, and I think that your life has more transition and change built into it up to this point than a lot of people that I've met and that most people know or meet or experience, going all the way back from where you mentioned you come from, growing up, all the way to now, leaving the military, leaving different roles, changing roles in the military is a huge thing. I know Jason and I spoke about that a little bit, how just being in similar environments, but they're very different, is challenging. Whole new kind of standards and cultural norms in each different area. And well, first of all, I'm kind of curious. I want to hear like a story about working. What's the team called again? On the president's helicopter staff?
Yeah, so that's HMX-1. It's the President's Helicopter Squadron, and it's a squadron of Marines that we do pretty much everything that has to do with the president's helicopter. A lot of logistics and security all built throughout that, and like everything is prestige in terms of like we want perfection for everything. You know what I mean? Like that's just kind of how the Marine Corps is in general. Yeah. But especially at our unit, because we serve the commander-in-chief, and regardless of what your political views are, you serve the commander-in-chief. Like that's what our job is. So
when you were doing that, and that's you kind of went right where I was hoping you would go, which is that there's a ton of in sport coaching, what we would describe as like technical and tactical aspects to it that like you said, they have to be perfect. There's just no room for error, no room for negotiation. But there's also a emotional side to it. And so one of the things that always makes me curious when you're doing a job like that, because I don't think it's a stretch for me to describe you as a high performer if you're doing that job. But I believe that you fall into the category of high performer if you're doing anything with or for the president.
Sure. Yes,
so,
pretty confident.
Yeah. And so your why was that something you wanted to do? And every day when you wake up and you're like, this is what I'm doing, what was the why behind that?
You know, that's a really good question. So when I joined, I didn't know that I was going to go to that unit. I joined because my recruiter told me that I could be a martial arts instructor because he knew that I did Muay Thai, and that most of the time would be like a 1 in a million, which it really was. And I was fortunate enough to do that. But through that process, I was able to be I was a military police officer and a canine officer. And then I got selected through that training. I was selected to work at HMX-1. You have to get clearance to work there. And so like how, in terms of like my mindset about all that, I think it's really goes back to when I started fighting. Like my first ever, I told you I started training when I was like 15 or 16, and I competed before the Marine Corps 4 times in amateur Muay Thai fights. And my first ever fight, I got my face beaten. Like I legit did not want to come out the second round. I was telling my corner, like, no, like, this is not good. Like, you know, like this isn't good. And they were like, too late, go. You know what I mean? Like, and that really did a number on me, because I'm like, maybe this isn't for me. Like my uncle was even like, you played softball, you played volleyball, like maybe you should go back to that stuff, you know? And I was like, maybe he's right. Like this, you know, like I'm out of my league here, you know? And I thought about it and I said, you know what? Like, I know, and I truly believe this, when you put aside all the excuses, when you look at like, okay, even if this isn't for me and I failed at this, okay, but what could I have done better? Like, where could I have made an improvement? And when I looked at that, I was like, well, I should be training at this other gym. And well, yeah, we train a lot different there. You know what I mean? Like, and I need to be doing this with my diet, or I need to be doing that. And making those small adjustments, boom, I won my next fight. And then I won the fight after that. And then I rematched the girl that beat me, almost knocked me out. And I beat her before the Marine Corps. So that was a huge, like, for my soul and for like my purpose. I was like, okay, I can do things where I fail and then I can come back and I can win. And then I took that with me into the Marine Corps, because I just wanted to constantly, and I still constantly am trying to be the best version of myself. And that's no doubt hard. I mean, it's a struggle every day. It's like, you got to take these baby steps every day. Like, what's that 1% that you can do today? Like, does it mean getting up, you know, an hour early, or setting out 20 minutes, like starting with 20 minutes to work out, or just to stretch and prepare you for your workout the next day. You know, all those little things make such a huge difference, and literally they add up to wins. Like in my mind, that's what champion mindset is. Like that's what makes champions, is they're constantly reevaluating and saying, okay, even if I did that good or I won, where can I get better? Like, what is going to allow me to be that 1% better every day, 1% better every day? And I think that's what it was when I worked for the president too. It was like, I had this, I wanted to serve in my heart, you know what I mean? And I knew that if I didn't, do it, that I would regret it. And I just really wanted to find something greater than myself. Like, I think a lot of times, I mean, obviously because we're in the human body, we're in our mind all the time. And to like get out of the mindset of like me, I, cause you hear your self-talk all the time. Like self-talk is so important. A lot of times we beat ourselves up. Like I am my biggest bully, legit. I am my biggest bully. And it's only when I take note of it that I'm like, yo, Kelsey, like, can you be like a little bit kinder to yourself? Like you would punch somebody that would say something to you. You know what I mean? Like that's crazy. So self-talk is so hugely important. And a lot of times life is a marathon. Like there's these few sprints, you know what I mean? The sprints are like, in my opinion, a game, you know what I mean? Or like a fight, or it's, doing a mission or something. Like, it's like, okay, I've trained for this. You know what I mean? I did all these 1% every day leading up to this. And that's why I will perform today. That's why I'm confident in my ability. And so that's kind of like the whole picture behind like that purpose-driven mindset and just trying to be the best version of yourself. And it's a hard thing to do. I mean, but life is a struggle, you know?
Yeah. Well, and you said in there too, and I think this is not a very big leap for anybody who's been in service with the military, is the idea of service being fundamental to who you are. And it whether you're in service of your country, in service of your president, in service of your kids, in service of the people you're teaching, service is, and that's, people always tell me when I say like, oh, have you ever tried teaching somebody that? Because whether it's through the show or whether it's through any of our stuff, we'll work with somebody where it's like they're not teachers or coaches or mentors, but they know a lot and they should be. And they're like, oh, I can't teach. It's like, no, you care. You are constantly in service of others, which means you can teach.
Yes. And that's beautifully said. Like that to me define, like there's selflessness and doing things not because you want recognition, not because you want someone to be like, oh my God, thank you so, so much, but doing things for other people, or just not always for yourself, or like of service, for me is high purpose. Like that's where I always feel most rewarded. Not when I'm getting recognition, not when I'm doing that, but when it's like I'm doing this because this makes me feel good. And I know it's going to make them feel good, or I know it's going to make things better for that person, or better for me in the long run, because this is something that I enjoy doing, you know? So that's something really special to tap into. And I think service allows you to connect to purpose. Everything for me in life, I'm always, whether it's people or companies, I try to only work with people that I enjoy and companies that I enjoy or find purpose in. Do you know, everything revolves around purpose for me, time and everything. So that's, I'm always just looking for I'm like, okay, what does this mean to me? You know what I mean? Like, does this mean to, like, and you can feel it, you can feel your passion, you know? And people have told me for years, they're like, I love how passionate you are about martial arts. And I'm like, thank you. Because to me, it's a gift, you know? Like I was lucky enough when I was younger to, one of my friends did it, and I was like, what is this? I want to find out. And I got beat up, and I got just, you know, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. But I grew from that, you know, and it's still like, it's always like, life is always going to be hard, but the more you put in, the more work that you put in toward your passion, toward your goals, toward your purpose, I think that's where we find happiness and fulfillment. And I'm always like searching for that.
Do you think that you are passionate about martial arts, or do you think that you are passionate?
I think I'm overall passionate because I love martial arts, but like I've done a lot of other things. Like I've taught collegiate athletes with a group called The Program. Love that. Love working with volleyball, lacrosse, all different kinds of sport players. Yeah, so for me, everything revolves around purpose. Like I'm always trying to figure out how I can be of good use, you know?
Yeah. And I love that. I love that because for me, a lot of my, especially now owning a business, I get to only do things that I'm passionate about and, and that have purpose for me, which is awesome because that's always been something that I struggle against, working for someone or working in an area that I'm not passionate about. And when I'm passionate about something, I can get it done. But if I'm not passionate about something, I can really not.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Like if there was a value to a course of how to avoid doing things you don't care about, I can hit that. Like I could give a PhD lecture in that.
Yes.
And but I think that it really is something where it's about finding ways to get passionate too about something that maybe on a macro scale you're not that passionate about. Like I don't love cleaning the floor. Like I don't wake up and I'm like, yeah, floor.
Right.
But if we're having people over and the people are gonna like appreciate the cleanliness of the house, or my girlfriend's gonna love that I did the floor and she didn't, like I can clean that floor if it's for her.
Right.
But if I lived alone, that floor is never getting clean.
Right. I love that though, because like that's so true and that's so real. Like there's plenty of things that that I do that I'm like, oh, I don't love to do this, but I'm going to do this because this is going to make, this is going to clear my head and then allow me to focus on something else, that I'm passionate about. And sometimes it's about that. It really is. It's about getting it done, knocking it out. And a lot of things aren't always the funnest things, but those things that you knock off your list and you're like, you keep up with, I think allow you to reach those greater things or allow you to be able to be of use. I'm a total contributor too. Like whenever I'm a part of a team or anything, and I love other people that are contributors because it's just this humble mindset of like, I'm not here to be the show. Like, I just want to be a part. Like, I want to like make a difference and I want to be of use. You know what I mean? And it's been hard for me it's hard for me to relate to people that are very selfish driven, that are very like me, I, and they kind of, they vent or they complain about, venting is different. Venting is good. But like, if they're complaining about things or it's always about them, it's like, it's very energy vampire-ish for me. And I'm I can't deal with this. Like, you know what I mean? Like, cause I'm always about, and sometimes that can get you in trouble is being always about other people because you kind of leave yourself behind. So it's good to be selfless to a certain extent, but you also have to take care of you. And I preach this, especially with a lot of military and veteran people, because a lot of people tend to be, or moms or parents, they tend to be people that are like, okay, I'm going to do and take care of this. And then it's like, wait a second, you don't even have an hour for yourself to, take a bath or to, re-energize your soul to do a workout or something. And cutting out that niche and making time for yourself is so, so important when you're already kind of a selfless person. You know what I mean? Because if you don't take care of yourself, there's no way that you can continue doing all the wonderful things that you do for other people.
Yeah. And I would like to just be very clear that this show in no way endorses baths. It's I don't want any of the listeners thinking that we're promoting baths. I think that they're gross.
I love baths. Are you serious?
I got that feeling, and I just want to make it clear that I'm not on board.
Oh my gosh, Epsom salt baths are like heavens. That if it wasn't for like my Epsom salt baths, I don't know what I would do. Like that's my sanity.
I can't do it. For some, like hot tub, okay. And I think in my head, the movement of the water and the heat, it makes it a little better, but bath, it's just like, I'm also 6'6", right? So
Oh my gosh.
there's no part of me being in a tub that feels good, looks good. Like everything's just it's like, it's as if you just took like 3 really long tree trunks and tried to bend them into a tub. Like, so yeah, it's a whole thing. Anyway, I went, as you're talking, you touched on failure response and kind of that bounce back, that little bit of boomerang skill, and the reference. I love martial arts just because you don't have time to not have it here, because the alternative is really getting the crap kicked out of you. So
yeah.
I'm also curious. So, and I talked to Jason about this when we had him on, and I talked about him when he had me on, but then he never published the episode, and I'll hold it against him forever. Is the idea of fear and fear response. And I'm really passionate about doing away with the term fearless. Like I really think that sets kids up to feel inadequate forever. Like I just don't see the benefit in anybody being perceived as fearless or telling others they're fearless. And I have yet to meet anybody who's ever served in the military or is in law enforcement or anything like that who disagrees with that idea. And so I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on fear and responding to fear, and how you use fear as opposed to try to avoid it.
Another great question, Ken. Fear. So like you said, I agree with you. If anyone tells you that they're like fearless, you know what I mean? It's like, chances are they're probably lying, because like there's gonna be something that scares you, or that is like intimidating for you, or that you just are like, I can't believe that exists. You know what I mean? So fear is very, very real. And it's very deep. Like I've had a couple really eye-opening dreams on fear, because I constantly find myself, like I was telling you about my master's degree, like, and a lot of people would be like, wait, getting a degree scares you? Like that, like you were fearful of that? And I was like, yeah, like I was afraid to fail. Like I was legit, like very intimidated. Like, and I'm a very physical person, and that's a little bit more natural for me. So when you put me in an environment that I'm like, hold on a second, I'm not sure I can do this, like that becomes really scary for me, because I mean, who likes to fail, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that over the years, I just have this like crazy adrenaline by running toward things that scare me. And I don't know why. It's like, it's kind of like the idea of like, I know that my potential is there, and I'm like, even if I'm like, I think that I can do this, I'm like, man, if you think that you could do this, why don't you do it? Like, why would you let anything control you, even if it intimidates you? You know what I mean? If it's a good thing. And so that's kind of been a huge thing for me, is like being like, okay, what is it that I could possibly do next, or that I want to do, that even though it's intimidating and it's fearful, that it would be cool if I could accomplish it. And those are kind of the things that I'm like, well, if it's healthy, or if it's like, you know, something that I'm interested in, even though if it's fearful to me, or if it's intimidating me, I'm kind of like, well, let's get it. You know what I mean? Let's see what I'm made of. Cause I want to know that if I have the potential, and if I follow the plan, like I know that there's ways and steps to get there. If I do those things, the chances of me being able to overcome it, or to be able to get it, is a reality. And that, I think, excites me. Like that motivates me. And, like, cause I don't, like, people ask, like when I first started doing, MMA, they were calling it cage, they're like, oh my gosh, people be like, you fight in the cage? And I'd be like, I don't really like that. Like when you say it that way, like it's, and it's scary. Like of course you're going in to fight, you know what I mean? Like that's if you're jumping out of a plane, like that's a natural fear. Like there's, like that, it's natural to be fearful of things like that could possibly hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
And allowing yourself to get from and taking all the steps and trying to get around or through fear, I think can be really empowering. And that's how I see like my fighting too, because it's like, I don't necessarily, like, I don't really want to fight anybody. You know what I mean? Like, I train to protect myself just in case, and competition is different, in my mind. And that's been a struggle too, is to identify the two, is to be like, okay, I'm competing versus if I have to use self-defense to protect myself or a loved one, you know what I mean? And all that. So fear is definitely, it exists on this planet, and it's real, and it affects everybody differently. But I truly, truly believe that if there's something that you're interested in, even if it scares you or it's intimidating or you're fearful of the consequence, if you think that it can impact your life and be a good thing to accomplish it, that you should create a plan and go for it. Because I truly believe that, like, we hardly tap into, I think sometimes, like, a lot of us barely like even get close to seeing what's truly inside. And I think a lot of times we're stronger than we think we are. I've worked with tons of athletes and tons of people, personal training and everything, that I'm like, yo, you can do this. You know what I mean? People will be like, oh, I'm not sure. I don't think I could ever. And I'm like, no. Like, you can do this. Like, you literally, like, you just showed you how to punch. Like, now you can hit this bag. Like, now you can do this. And they're like, oh my gosh. Like, it's just this like mind opening thing. So I don't know. It's like it's deep and it's intrinsic, because a lot of times we create the fear for ourselves in some situations. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But fear is real, and it's a huge motivator, but it's also a survival mechanism. You know what I mean? Like, if you feel something intuitively, you need to kind of figure out why that is. And then also, like, I always tell people about the water, I respect the water. Like, you have to respect fear in a sense. Like, fear is there for a reason.
Yeah.
So it's like this balance. You got to be like on the line in a way.
Well, we're not that far removed in the great timeline. We're not that far removed as humans. Like, we're at the very back, small little percentage of what is Earth and all the animals and all the different versions and whatever in terms of time. And we're not that far removed from, if we walked out of our cave, we could die from a million different things. So our brains are very much physiologically still in that place, right? So that's the thing that I think we live in spite of all the evil. And you mentioned it, Jason mentioned the same thing. And in spite of the evil and the dangers that do exist in the world, we live in a relatively safe world in comparison to other times in history for humans.
Yes, very true.
But our brains are essentially the same makeup as they were when we didn't live in that world where there was saber-tooth tigers and woolly mammoths and that kind of whatever. Yes. And so we have all these physiological responses that are essentially, anytime there's something new, our amygdala and our hippocampus and stuff like we're exploding inside our brain, and it's saying run from that thing as if it's a saber-tooth tiger. And it's really just like a really hard math problem, or it's learning to swim, or it's riding a horse, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Flight or fight is a really interesting concept. And when I teach self-defense, sometimes I teach that flight might be the best option. Mm-hmm. Like, you might just want to get out of here. Like, you might just need to go. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But there might be a time where you need to fight, and where you can fight, where you can fight and you can stand up for yourself. And if that time comes, then wouldn't it be smart to take all the preparation, whether it's a math problem or a real fight or a career goal, you take all the proper steps that and even if you don't know them, if you don't know how to get there, you got to start asking people, hey, how do I accomplish this? What do I do? What are the, and start, just ask as many questions as you can and create a plan from there. And I think that really helps, because you're right. We have our minds, and the way our neurons fire in terms of fight or flight and fear is I think it's very old school. You know what I mean? And it's like, to get into that even further, if you're training yourself or you're preparing yourself, you're going to be more familiar. Mm-hmm. And being more familiar allows you to make those quicker decisions too, which can save your life. So yeah, it's extremely interesting concept to me. And I think that a lot of times, like, we live in a safer world, as you said, and a lot of times we can overcome our fears, and we just got to take the steps necessary to recognize them, respect them, and say, you know what, I have options here. Like, I can move through this, or you know what, this is something that I'm not, it doesn't work for me, but I can move through fear in a different way on this side. You know what I mean? So making those adjustments and those calls can be challenging sometimes, but if you've never thought about it, or if you haven't created a plan, or kind of been like, you know what, how am I going to respond? Then how can you ever, when you get in that moment, I think it's easier to kind of be frozen. Do you know what I mean? Because you're like, wait a second, what do I do from here? Mm-hmm. And so I think just the intellectual process of asking the question, or recognizing what you're scared of, or what you're fearful of, can kind of push you through that. But yeah, it's deep, and for everybody it's different. Like, everybody has different things that they are fearful of and how they deal with fear. I think most of the time we can move through it. I think most of the time we can get through a lot of our fears, and we can overcome them.
Well, it's funny because you said a little while ago that you, at some point, I think the exact quote was, at some point in the last few years, you've gotten this adrenaline rush from going towards fear, and you don't know where it comes from. And I am going to hypothesize real quick that it probably comes from something that I believe and teach regularly, which is the introduction of fear, planning, and failure very early in your life. You spent a large amount of your childhood being scared, having no choice but to go into areas that scared you, literally and figuratively, internally and externally, and planning, reacting, and realizing that there's a lot of moments that you went towards fear that benefited you, even if you didn't know it at the time. And we talk about that all the time there's so many, most people describe it as like kids these days, and how soft everything is for them. And that's 100% not true. Cause like you mentioned earlier, where it was just dial up and that kind of thing. I would not want to have had social media or the kind of resources when I was a kid.
Same. I totally agree with you. I was so happy that, like, when I was older, I mean, must've been like 16, 18, or somewhere around there. I mean, cell phones just came, you know what I mean? Like, we had pictures and we had cell phones, and I was like, oh, there was this old game these kids won't relate nowadays, Snake, you know what I mean? Like, that was our only game. Played that game so much, and it's just, and I don't envy the social media thing for our youth. Like, there's a lot of like things that have kind of happened, I think, over the years that have proved that it's probably better to find yourself than to try to find yourself online first. You know what I mean?
Well, the thing that I can't even imagine is just many of us have moments of being bullied. In one way or another. What I can't imagine is, like, when it happened to me, I would go home. And when I got home, it was done. Nobody bullied me at home. There was never anything there. But now you just can't escape it. It follows you, and it can be all encompassing. And then it's on the internet where anybody can see it. And even though you're probably just an 11-year-old or 12-year-old or something like that in some town, and it's not like the whole world's watching, it feels like it is. And
exactly. Yeah.
Because absolutely. It could be.
it felt like that before when you would kind of like, you know what I mean? When you didn't have, like, when people you couldn't text anyone after, school or anything. It felt like that before. You're like, oh my gosh, I have to deal with this tomorrow at school. But like you said, at least I got to go home and kind of like decompress.
Yeah.
And I feel like with all the noise nowadays, that's even harder. And I think that goes into a little bit more into like what I was talking about with self-care. Like we have to take new levels. Like me disconnecting from my phone is something that I do when I can. I try to do it. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to leave my phone. Even if I just go for a walk. Like what, you know what I mean? And I'm like, not a unsafe walk. Do you know what I mean? But like, I'm like, you have to set aside that time where you can disconnect. It's really, really important, I think, for our psyche, because constantly our mind like goes and like, you're right. It's just, we live in a different time, and these things are important. These concepts are important. And I really wish that I was able to hear some of this stuff when I was younger, because I think it would have allowed me to be more kind to myself and just be more accepting of myself like early on. Because who knows, I mean, like there's so much exterior pressure. Sometimes it feels there's so much noise. And the only thing, like I've gotten into meditation in the last couple of years, and meditation, yoga, stretching and stuff. And that's really brought me a lot of peace, because it's allowed me to kind of silence everything else out and not overwork myself or over worry myself about things that are just out of my control, or that really probably won't matter in 5 years. Yeah.
Have you come across any of Brian McKenzie's stuff?
No, I haven't.
Okay. So Brian McKenzie he's a performance expert.
Okay.
And I've gone through his stuff time and time again because of his breathing stuff and the way that he makes breathing something that's super conceptual for someone like me, where I don't really want to do yoga. My meditation is very short and I practice it, but it's like, it is what it is. I'm very accepting of it being not the strongest practice, and I don't beat myself up over it, but it's never long. The longer I meditate, the less relaxing it is for me. I know that. So, but he has really taught me and continues to teach me all the time. I say it like we're best buds. We don't know each other. I'm trying to get him on the show, but the way that he conceptualizes breathing, connects it to the science of the body and that kind of thing is super, super concrete for me. And even just simple, like I literally do it while we're recording the show, like just breathing through my nose and really being conscientious of not breathing through my mouth too much and timing out my breaths. And I now sleep without breathing through my mouth, like mouth shut. I fall asleep with my mouth shut. I wake up with my mouth shut, and I sleep way better.
Yeah.
It took a long time of practice and training and different techniques, but it's changed a lot of stuff. My resting heart rate went down with that being the only change, all those kind of things. But I think that his stuff would probably resonate with you too, just because it's very performance based. I know he's done some stuff with shooting as well. And
I'm 100% going to look him up, because it's funny that you mentioned that. The last podcast that I did, I'm a coach with this group called Full Spectrum Warrior. And one of the other coaches, she's like a breath work instructor. And we had the whole podcast talking about the breath. And the breath, I mean, when we put things in perspective about breathing, like really everything revolves around the breath. You know what I mean? Like the breath is like the only thing I think that we can like truly, really control, like, and be cognizant of it. And a lot of times we forget to breathe. Like I can't tell you how many times I'm like in the moment, or I'm breathing shallow instead of taking full deep breaths. And the way that releases, like you said, in the physiological aspect of the body, is just incredible. And whether it's a sport, oh my gosh, when I'm training and I'm like, everything for me, it's like breath control. Breath control. Like that's been over the years, something that's been a huge lifesaver. It really makes a huge difference. And, it's just incredible what you can do just around the breath. I'm glad you brought that up, because I really think like that if I did more breathing exercises like I should be, that my peace would increase significantly. My training too, like you said, your sleep, Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well,
Definitely.
and to connect it to something you said earlier, it really is. I always tell people that if you want to make the biggest possible impact in the simplest two ways, it's figure out your breath and figure out your self-talk. And
Dang. Beautiful.
if you start working on those two things, it's going to change your life. And it doesn't involve changing your diet or exercising more or changing your sleep or drinking less alcohol or anything like that. It's just all it is just paying attention to being a lot more aware of how you breathe and being a lot more aware of how you think.
That's
And
some of the greatest advice that I've ever heard. I'll be completely
oh
honest with you. Those are
yeah.
the two things that I think are some of the best advice I've ever heard anyone share, for real.
Well,
Because that's like a
I wish more
step.
people who knew me had heard you say that. I need to.
That is such a good step in the right direction. Like I talk about baby steps. Like if that is the one thing that you do in your day to improve your day,
Yeah.
one or two things, like you're actually going to see some improvement.
Yeah. Well, I tell like you can do both those things at your desk. You can do both those things in the shower, on the toilet, brushing your teeth, making dinner, driving in your car, any of it. So it's yeah. Um, I would be remiss though if I didn't wrap up, and I actually went on a tangent, so it's 100% my fault. The quick thought of the fact that we are always trying to teach others, whether we're teaching teachers or coaches or parents or business owners. Many of the people that we work with are all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that challenging children early leads to resilient and gritty children late is something that I think when you said that you didn't know where it came from, it's like I would hypothesize without a doubt that where your resilience and your ability to change and grow and adapt and really take life's hits and keep on rolling, it has to, in my mind, somewhere be connected to the fact that you learned that growing up. Whether you learned it in a way you wanted to or in an ideal
Right.
way is actually not what we're talking about. It's the fact that the challenges were introduced, you succeeded and you failed, and because of that, the symptom of that learning is joining the military, is getting into martial arts, all that kind of stuff. It's not that those things alone taught you the ability to deal with it. It's actually
Yeah.
the fact that your ability to deal with it before that made you willing to try the things and succeed at the things that you tried, which is pretty
That is super spot on. And I've done therapy before and no one's ever broken down like that. Like that was really like,
Wait until I bill you for this podcast.
I was gonna say, I was like, oh my God. Because it's crazy. Like when I was a kid, I think I mentioned this before, I was just trying to figure out why things were like this, like why I would think, why do other people have it easier? You know what I mean? Like, why am I in this situation? And it wasn't, like you said, whether I liked it or not, that was my way of learning and tapping into the decisions that came after, which motivated me into these other things. And I have a huge respect for that. And I know, and I've said this to quite a few people as an adult, is that now looking back as an adult, I always wanted to grow up so I could make my own circumstances, and that I had a totally different perception on it as an adult than I did as a kid, because I thought to myself, like, this has made me who I am. And as hard as it was, or is it sometimes, like, everything has led up to this moment, and I'm thankful for that, because I've been through a lot, and it's allowed me to experience I've had some wonderful times in my life and things that I'm proud of, but I don't think I would have reached those if I would have allowed my self-talk or to be on a level of like, just, to stay on that level of, this is a bad time and, this happened to me, or kind of a victim mentality or something like that. I don't think it would have allowed me to grow in such a way. So perspective is really interesting. It can definitely change things and motivate you. And even if you're at the low, you never know what greatness can come from being in a really bad place. So
Yeah. And I'm glad that you went to perspective, because now I told you an hour and I blew the hour away by keeping you in here a little bit
it was me
longer.
too. I was on these long tangents. I'm over here like I should shorten that up. I'm
Well, it's
sorry.
funny. Well, no, it's okay. The people that work with me, they're like, nobody wants to listen to an hour and a half long podcast. I'm like, yeah, but when I'm recording it, I don't want to stop. Like, I'm enjoying the conversation.
I
So,
know. I'm the
and I
same way.
don't want to edit stuff out. So they're getting an hour and a half long podcast. I don't care. But before I go into some of the quick hitting questions that I like to wrap up with, and I've got a couple that are just for you, because they target some people that could be listening that I think will want to hear the answers. But before that, where can people follow you? Where can they check you out and pay attention to what you're doing?
Yeah. Okay. So all my social media is at Kelsey De Santis. And I mostly post on Instagram because I tend to like the platform. It's my preference.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would love to connect with anybody. I'm super excited to have people who are in my corner, so to speak. And I get a lot of good responses in terms of like people doing new things or trying new things because I put it out there. So yeah, you can follow me at Kelsey De Santis.
Perfect. And are you working on anything right now? Do you have anything coming out that you'd like to
Yes.
plug?
Yeah. So next month I'm soft launching. We're going to make some fine detail, probably adjust some things depending on how people like them and what we're doing. But it's an online platform for martial arts, actually, because I've met so many people that are like, how do I train with you? Or you're not close to me. So how do I find a gym? Like I want to get into self-defense, but I don't know if I want to start with boxing or kickboxing or jiu-jitsu. Like, what do I do? And so I've made quite a bit of recommendations to people, but that was usually post-COVID or pre-COVID. And now I think that with COVID and everything, and also using technology to the best and most efficient ways, I guess you could say, is to be able to train anywhere at any time with the best coaches, like always with the people that are like, these are the experts in this field. And so that's what me and my partner, one of the coaches from American Top Team, he's worked with countless champions. We put together this platform that we're launching where you can become a member and you can personal train with, athletes and competitors and world champions in ways that you never really have been able to before. And we're kind of like putting them all in one spot on our platform. It's called Viribus, and it stands for strength. We believe in strength in just the ability to start. Sometimes starting is the hardest part.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we're really excited about it. And I think and I hope that it'll change in the MMA industry and the mixed martial arts and self-defense industry in a way that allows people to learn that never really had the ability or had the environment that they wanted, because I think a lot of people want to do MMA or they want to do they want self-defense tools, but they don't really know where to go or are a little bit intimidated. Mm-hmm. And I think our platform solves that problem. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Wow, that's awesome.
Thanks.
Okay, ready? This is the intimidating lightning round. Okay. You can pass on any of the questions, and they're not that intimidating. Okay. So the title of intimidating lightning round is actually a misnomer. The first question is, if you were to go back and give any advice to Kelsey when you were in your mid-teens, what would it be?
It would probably be that, friends, you really don't need that many friends. you need one or two good people that believe in you and that support you, and to love yourself, to be just accept yourself and love who you are. And if you don't love who you are, then figure out what it would take for you to love yourself, what it is that inspires you or your purpose. Start asking those questions now. Like, what is it that makes me happy? Or was it that like makes me feel like I'm on fire to do this? You know, like I'm fired up to do this. What is that? And run toward it. And like, and whatever it is, run toward it. And even if it doesn't work out, you'll find what you're looking for. I truly believe that.
Perfect. That was a great answer. So again, I told you that all these questions are kind of designed with a very specific listener in mind, and hoping that it can impact somebody's life. So, but feel free to pass this next one if you want to. If you were to go back to Kelsey right before you got the cosmetic surgery that you mentioned, what advice would you give her?
That's a hard one because my mind was set. You're beautiful just as you are.
Nice. What about when you were, I think the way that you put it, when you became pregnant, I believe was the way that you described it, and you had all the emotions that you mentioned about becoming a mom. What advice would you give Kelsey then?
That it does come naturally. Like you will tap into your nurture. You will definitely tap into your nurture. But being a parent is all about selflessness. It's all about your child comes before you. That's the whole point, I think. So.
And what about, so the Kelsey that's going to face a challenge at some point in the next, let's say 5 years, what do you want her to remember when that challenge comes?
That you've overcome so much in the past that no matter what you do at this point, you've lived a good life, and go for it 100%. Do whatever you want. because regardless, you know who you are outside of what you do. I know who I am outside of just what I do, and I'm happy with that person.
Damn, that put a bow on it just perfect. Now some challenge is going to come up later on, and my voice of all voices will pop in your head. It'll be like, oh, Ken asked me.
Yes, I'm going to remember this conversation. I'm going to be like, I'm going to stick with it, Ken.
Well, I appreciate so much you being on and sharing this amount of time with me, and we got to find a way to work together. I think we've got to.
I love that.
Yeah,
that's fun.
Whether it's you coming into our stuff or me coming and helping you with some of your stuff, I would love to work with you and do something like that. So we got to find a way to make that work.
Thanks, Ken. I appreciate it. And if anyone ever gives you any crap about like these being too long, you can always break them up into pieces. Be like, all right, here's the first half, second.
True. Well,
because you're right. It's good conversations, and like honestly, I wish that I could have listened or heard some of these topics when I was younger. It would have I think it would have really encouraged me. And the strongest women, and in particular, I'm speaking about women, like women have always like encouraged me and kind of like motivated me, like, but I was always searching for like a strong woman to like look to. And I definitely found that in the Marine Corps. There were these women that I was like, oh my gosh, like you're definitely the strongest woman that I've ever met, So find those people, whether you're a woman or a man or whoever, it doesn't matter. Find somebody that you're like, this person, and find a couple people, you know what I mean? Because sometimes people change, and it's just so nice to be able to have somebody to look up to. I still have tons of friends that I'm like, they motivate me, they inspire me, they keep me going. So that's important.
Made me think of my mom just there.
Oh, good. Oh, Mom.
I'm gonna have to give her a call when we get off here now.
Definitely do it. Do it.
Well, thank you so much, and I look forward to hopefully working together in the future. And at some point you're gonna have to take me out shooting. I've never shot a gun.
Yes, let's do it. That would be so much fun.
I'm not going with Jason. I want to go.
I love it. I'm gonna tell him that. I'm like, guess who's taking Ken shooting?
He's like, good. I don't want to take him anyway.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Yeah, I'd love to shoot with you anytime. That'd be super fun.
Very cool.
We'll figure it out.
All right. Well, take care. Thanks again. We'll chat soon.
You too. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Make sure you subscribe wherever you get podcasts or to this YouTube channel to hear our weekly episodes.